I never thought I'd find myself in this position. Me, Caden Hawthorne, a 53-year-old mechanic, standing in the dim hallway of a house I should have never stepped foot in. This place, a crumbling shadow of what it once was, had been abandoned for years. Yet here I was, preparing to destroy everything I had left for the sake of quick money. It started with Clara. Clara had always been the kind of woman who made things happen. Ambitious, calculated. She had a knack for seeing opportunities where I saw only risks, and like always she convinced me to follow her plan. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. We were drowning in debt. I couldn't remember the last time I felt financially stable. My mechanic shop was barely holding on, and with my estranged father's recent passing, we inherited the house. The place was a wreck. Nothing but peeling wallpaper, sagging floors, and a history of secrets I'd never wanted to face. But Clara had a plan, and she wasn't going to let it go. "You know that house from your father?" she asked one evening, her voice tight with urgency. "What if we could turn it into something that makes us money?" I wasn't thrilled about the idea. That house was just a deadweight, a reminder of the years I spent battling my father's absence. He wasn't exactly a man I mourned. The house held no sentimental value. But Clara, she was just going to let it go. "A haunted house," she said, leaning in with a grin that was both sly and excited. "A real one, I mean not real, but it set'll feel real. People will pay for it. We could clean it up, set up some old props, maybe even do a few fake scares. A whole experience, quick money, Caden." I felt a pang in my chest, a mix of curiosity and dread. The idea seemed ridiculous, but it also seemed like the only shot we had left. After all, who could resist an easy payday? But Clara wasn't thinking small. She wanted more than just a haunted house attraction. She wanted a real experience, a sensation, a spectacle. At the time, I just thought she was being overzealous. But now I know she was planning something far darker than I could ever imagine. I told her I wasn't sure about the idea. I was a man of logic, grounded in reality. No ghost, no matter how cleverly staged, could scare me. But Claire's eyes, those eyes made me second guess. The way she looked at me like I was her lifeline. She wasn't asking, she was expecting me to step up. I said, "Thought this through, Caden. We need the money. We can't keep going like this," she insisted, her tone soft but persuasive. I said, "Not asking you to believe in ghosts. Just help me set this up." I agreed hesitantly, but deep down I felt the familiar pang of insecurity gnawing at me. It was always about proving myself. I'd spent so long trying to fix things, my business, my life, my family, and now the house was the next problem to solve. I didn't realize it then, but that house would be the one that would break me. The first time I noticed something strange was as I worked in the living room, clearing out old furniture. I'd been alone in the house for a while, scraping at the dust, when the light flickered, just for a moment. I shook it off, a loose bulb, probably. But then I heard it, the whisper. It was soft, barely there. At first I thought it was Clara calling from another room. But when I checked, she wasn't there. The whisper was so faint, I almost convinced myself I imagined it. But when it came again, clear as day, a chill crawled up my spine. "Kaiden?" It was too real. I stood frozen in place, trying to dismiss the thought as my mind playing tricks on me. The house was old, sure. The plumbing creaked. The wind made the windows rattle. But this was something else. I tried to tell Clara, but she wasn't set having it. "It's probably just the wind," she said, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. "You stir overthinking it. It's an old house, remember?" But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every night after that it was the same, a flicker of light, a whisper just out of reach, shadows that danced in the corners of my eyes. It didn't feel like normal old house sounds anymore. It felt like something was watching me. But the biggest shock came when Clara suggested we make the haunt real. "What if we made it believable?" she asked one evening, her voice low as if she were sharing a secret. "What if we pretended it was a real haunting? Imagine the effect it would have on people. Pay more if they think it sits real." I thought she was joking, but Clara wasn't joking. She was serious. "You star going to fake it?" "Why?" I asked, confused. You want us to create an actual haunting? I don't too know about that, Clara. She leaned closer, eyes gleaming with wild excitement. Think about it, Kaiden. This place has history. People love this stuff. The stories, the mystery. If we can convince people it's haunted, it's not just a haunted house attraction, it's a full experience. We make a fortune. All we have to do is amplify the experience. I shook my head, disbelief and unease churning in my gut. But then she said it, the one thing I couldn't said ignore. If we pull this off, Kaiden, this could change everything. Our debts, our future. We shall be out of the hole forever. It wasn't the money that sold me. It was the feeling that I might finally be able to prove myself to her, to all of them, to myself. So I agreed. But deep down, I knew I was stepping into something darker than I could ever imagine. I didn't realize that this house, this damned house, wasn't just haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by my own past. I should have walked away. But the truth was, Clara had already made up my mind for me. And once I crossed that threshold, there was no going back. It didn't take long for the house to start showing its true nature. The first few days were spent setting up hanging old curtains, placing dusty furniture, stringing up fake cobwebs. Clara was insistent that we make it look authentic. The more convincing it appeared, the more money we could make. But as we worked, something else began to take shape. At first, it was just the little things. Nothing concrete, nothing I could explain. It was easy to brush it off. A flicker of light, a door that creaked when no one was near it, shadows at the edge of my vision, stretching in ways that didn't quite match the angles of the room. But when I was alone one evening, that's when it all changed. I had stayed behind to finish some last-minute setup, adjusting the old portrait frames we'd found in the attic, dusting off the furniture one more time. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the broken windows. The place was eerily quiet, save for the soft hum of the wind outside. That ceps when I heard it. A voice. At first, it was so soft, so distant, I thought maybe I was hearing things. I paused, heart pounding, straining to listen. Nothing. I went back to my work, my mind racing. Maybe it was just the old wood creaking. Maybe I was overthinking it. But then it came again, clearer this time. Kaiden. My breath caught in my throat. My name, it was unmistakable. I turned, my eyes scanning the dark corners of the room. The shadows seemed to stretch further than before. I could almost feel the air thickening around me. I stood frozen, trying to rationalize it. It had to be the wind, or perhaps one of the old pipes in the walls settling. That's all it could be, right? I shook my head, trying to calm my nerves. But then the whisper came again, closer this time, more urgent. Kaiden, don't sit. My body tensed, my mind struggling to find an explanation. I reached for the light switch, flicking it on, desperate to illuminate the room. The light buzzed, flickered, and then went out completely. The silence was deafening. The air felt heavier, as though the house itself was pressing in on me, suffocating me. I could hear my heart thundering in my chest. I turned toward the corner where the whisper had come from. But the room was empty. Of course it was empty. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, waiting for something, anything to happen. The silence stretched on, thick and oppressive. Then, in the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shadow. A figure standing at the end of the hallway, barely visible in the dim light. I blinked, and it was gone. I stood motionless, my pulse racing. Could it actually be real? A ghost? A trick of the light? I wasn't sure what to think anymore. The house felt alive now, alive in a way I couldn't explain. When Clara came home later that evening, I told her about what happened. It sets just your nerves, she said dismissively. You set probably just overworked, Kaiden. This whole thing is stressing you out more than it should. It sets just a house. It sets old, sure, but it sets just a house. But I wasn't set so sure anymore. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Even as I lay in bed, the whispers lingered, echoing in my mind. My heart raced every time I closed my eyes. I could feel the weight of something unseen, a presence that had been there all along, just waiting for me to notice. The next day, the strange occurrences continued. The flickering lights returned. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. And when I went down to the basement to check on the wiring, that's when I found it, the first real sign that something was terribly wrong. In the corner of the basement, hidden under a pile of old boxes, was a piece of old paper. It was yellowed with age, torn at the edges, and stained with something I couldn't quite make out. I picked it up, my hands trembling as I unfolded it. It was a letter. I couldn't make out most of the words at first, but one thing was clear. My last name, Hawthorne. The letter spoke of an inheritance, a curse and an unspeakable tragedy tied to the family. The writing was erratic, as though the person who had written it had been desperate, frantic. The letter mentioned the curse of the Hawthorne bloodline, and something about giving the house its due. I dropped the letter, my mind racing. The room felt colder, the walls closing in on me. This was no longer just a scam. The house was alive, and it wasn't set happy. I ran upstairs, searching for Clara, but she was nowhere to be found. It felt like I was alone in the house, the walls closing in tighter with every passing second. The house wasn't just haunted, it was feeding off something darker, something far more sinister. And I had no idea what I had unleashed. I felt a growing dread settle in my chest. What had I done? When Clara finally came home, I showed her the letter. She barely looked at it. "It's just an old piece of paper," she said, her voice flat. "Nothing to worry about." But I knew, deep down, that this wasn't just about a haunted house. This was something far worse. The curse was real, and we were already too deep into it. I tried to convince Clara to stop, to leave the house, sell it, and cut our losses before it was too late. But she was stubborn, fixated on the idea of money. The more I tried to back out, the more she pushed. "I don't care about the house, Caden," she said, her voice hardening. "I care about getting out of this mess. We need this money, and we are going to make it happen." But I wasn't so sure anymore. Something had shifted. This wasn't just a scam. The house wasn't just haunted. It was cursed, and it was pulling us deeper into its grip. And we were about to learn that there was no escaping it. I wish I could say I ignored the warning signs. I wish I could tell you that I walked away when I had the chance. But I didn't. Instead, I dug deeper. And what I found, well, it shattered everything I thought I knew about my family, about the house, and about myself. It was late one evening, after another long day of setting up fake haunts, when I found the old journal in the attic. It had been tucked away in a corner, hidden under a stack of old, forgotten belongings. The leather cover was cracked with age, and dust clung to its pages like it had been left untouched for decades. I almost didn't open it, but something inside me urged me to take a look. Maybe because I had already started questioning everything about the house. Why had it been abandoned? Why had no one bothered to care for it? What was its history? I sat down, dusting off the pages, and began reading. The journal belonged to my great-grandfather, a man I had never met, but whose shadow seemed to loom over everything I did. From the first page, it was clear that the Hawthorne family was no stranger to dark secrets. The entries were erratic, written in a shaky hand, and filled with strange occult references. It wasn't just ramblings about the house, it was something much more disturbing. One passage caught my eye. "The curse of the Hawthorne bloodline cannot be escaped. The price for betrayal will always be paid by those who dare to carry it forward." My heart sank as I read those words. Betrayal. It was something I knew well. But this wasn't just about some petty family squabble. It was something deeper, darker. The journal spoke of rituals, of debts owed to forces far beyond the living, and it all tied back to the house. My great-grandfather had been involved in occult practices, using the house as a sanctuary for forbidden rituals. The family had made sacrifices to protect their wealth, their power, and their place in society. And somewhere along the line, those sacrifices turned into something else, something cursed. The more I read, the more my blood ran cold. The house wasn't just haunted. It was the epicenter of a long-standing, twisted history. The Hawthorne family had dabbled in forces they didn't fully understand, and now it was all coming back to haunt me. I heard the sound of footsteps behind me, and I quickly slammed the journal shut. Clara was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed. "What are you reading?" she asked, her voice sharp. I hesitated, unsure of how to explain what I sept just uncovered. It's journal from my great-grandfather. He wrote about the house, about things I don't sept even understand. Clara stepped into the room, her expression skeptical. Things like what? I swallowed hard. Dark things, occult rituals, sacrifices. Clara laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. Come on, Kaiden. That's just some old man Sip's ramblings. This house is old. It's Sip's been around for centuries. It's Sip's bound to have a story, but that doesn't Sip's mean it's Sip's cursed. But I wasn't so sure anymore. I had always believed in logic, in facts. But what I was reading, it didn't feel like just stories. It felt like a warning, and that voice, the one that had whispered my name, that was no coincidence. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was alive, not in the way I'd imagined, with creaky floors and creaking doors. It felt like something more, something that had been waiting for us, waiting for me. I started looking through more of the old documents, hoping to find some clue, something to explain what was happening. Among the pages, I found a map, a hand-drawn map of the house with strange symbols scrawled in the corners. The map marked various sacred areas, places that were clearly meant to be avoided. I felt a chill run down my spine as I studied the map. It showed a hidden room beneath the basement, one that didn't appear in the original floor plans. The more I pieced together, the more I realized I was walking deeper into something I couldn't control. The curse was tied to the bloodline, to the sins of my ancestors, and now I was part of it. The house was feeding off our fears, our greed, and the deception we had unwittingly brought into its walls. I had to know more. So I started searching the town's records, hoping to uncover more about my family's past. What I found made my stomach turn. It was in the local archives, a police report from decades ago, detailing a series of mysterious deaths connected to the Hawthorne family. The victims were all close relatives, people who had disappeared without a trace, their bodies never found. The report mentioned strange occurrences, voices, shadows, and a presence that seemed to follow the family wherever they went. And then there it was, in bold letters. The Hawthorne family is cursed. It is believed that the curse was brought on by their involvement in occult practices and ritualistic sacrifices to maintain power. The curse must be broken, but it can never be undone. It was all real. The curse wasn't just a family legend, it was the truth. My great-grandfather, my father, and now me. We were all connected to it, and Clara had dragged us right back into the heart of it. I found her in the kitchen, sipping her coffee like everything was normal. The realization hit me like a punch in the gut. She didn't care about the curse. She didn't care about any of this. She was only interested in the money, in the idea that we could make a fortune off this house. But I wasn't so sure anymore. The more I learned, the more I realized that we weren't just involved in a scam. We were part of something far darker, something that had been waiting for us. I had to stop it. But the question was, how? Clara was too deep into her obsession with the money to see what was happening. She refused to believe any of it. To her, this was still just a way out of our financial mess. But I could feel it now. The weight of everything that had come before us, all the lies, all the broken promises, all the sacrifices. The curse had never been lifted. It had just been passed down through the generations, and now it was mine to deal with. The question was no longer whether I could break the curse, it was whether I could survive it. I couldn't escape the feeling that something was terribly wrong, and yet every time I tried to confront Clara, she dismissed me. It's all in your head, Kaiden, she'd say, brushing it off like it was nothing more than a bad dream. But this wasn't a bad dream, this was real. This was happening, and the more I tried to ignore it, the worse it got. The house, once just an old structure filled with memories of a father I never cared to know, had turned into a prison. I couldn't think, I couldn't breathe without feeling like I was trapped in some twisted nightmare. The walls seemed to press in closer each day, and every creak, every whisper, every shadow felt like it was watching me. I tried to sleep at night, but the silence was suffocating. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing the shadows moving. It was like the house was alive, breathing, watching. I felt like I was losing my mind. One evening, as I was trying to clear my head by fixing up the front porch, I saw something out of the corner of my eye, a figure standing in the window of the second floor. My heart stopped. For a split second I thought it was Clara, but she hadn't been upstairs. I ran up to the second floor, heart pounding, but when I threw open the door there was nothing. Nothing at all. But I knew what I'd seen. That night I had trouble sleeping. The voices in my head were louder now, constant whispers scratching at the edges of my thoughts, taunting me. I could hear them even as I lay in bed trying to block them out. At first I tried to tell myself it was stress. I was exhausted. My nerves were shot. But deep down I knew this wasn't just stress. I was being haunted. But by what? What was this thing, this force that had attached itself to me, to Clara, to this house? I decided to take a step back, to do something I hadn't done in years, think. I couldn't let this consume me. I had to be logical. This couldn't be real. Ghosts didn't exist. Spirits didn't haunt houses. The strange noises, the flickering lights, the shadowy figures. It had to be some rational explanation. Maybe there was something about the house that I hadn't figured out yet. Maybe it was a series of coincidences, a collection of old pipes, shifting beams, and the stress of our financial situation all coming together in my mind. I had to put a stop to it. But how? The only way I could think of was to research the house further. If I could find a logical explanation, I could put it to rest. But every time I dug into the history, the deeper I got, the more I realized that this wasn't just a house with a few quirks. It was something far more sinister. The whispers seemed to follow me now, getting louder each time I searched for answers. Clara wasn't helping. She was still obsessed with the idea of turning this into something profitable. Every day she would push me to move forward with the haunted house idea, ignoring my growing panic. "We can't stop now, Kaiden," she'd say. "We're so close. Think of what we'll have if this works." But I couldn't think that way anymore. I couldn't let myself be consumed by the money. The house wasn't just haunted. It was cursed, and I was stuck in the middle of it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my thoughts racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the shadow in the hallway again. But this time, it was different. The shadow wasn't just standing there. It was moving. It was watching me. It knew what I was thinking. I could almost feel it, like it was waiting for me to do something. Waiting for me to make a choice. In a panic, I grabbed the journal from my great-grandfather and flipped through the pages, desperate to find something, anything that would explain what was happening. The handwriting was scrawled and frantic. The ink faded from years of neglect. But then something caught my eye. A passage that hadn't stood out before. "The house will call to you, Kaiden. It knows you and it will test you. The Hawthorne bloodline has always been a part of it, a part of the curse. It will not release you until it has you fully. The only way to break it is to face what you fear most." I froze, the weight of the words settling like lead in my stomach. The only way to break it is to face what you fear most. I slammed the journal shut, my heart racing. What did it mean? What was I supposed to face? What was the house trying to do to me? It was then that I understood. This wasn't just about ghosts or supernatural forces. This was about me. The house was manipulating me, feeding off my fear, my guilt, my unresolved pain. It was using my own weaknesses against me. I stood up, my mind reeling. The house wasn't just some haunted attraction. It was a living entity, an ancient curse that had attached itself to my family. And now it was targeting me. It was forcing me to confront my darkest fears. I could feel it, closing in on me, suffocating me. The more I tried to resist, the worse it got. Clara, of course, didn't see any of this. She was too focused on her plan, on the money, on getting the house ready for its grand unveiling. She didn't understand what was happening. She didn't understand that we were no longer in control. I wasn't just scared anymore. I was terrified. I knew that I couldn't stop this alone. I needed to find a way to break the curse, to stop whatever force had taken hold of me, of this house. But what if it was too late? The house wasn't just a home anymore. It was a battleground, and I was losing. I had always thought of myself as a man who could fix things, cars, broken engines, pieces of metal, but this was different. This was something I couldn't repair with a wrench or a few hours of hard work. This wasn't just a haunted house. It was something much worse. The house was a living entity, feeding off my fear, and I could feel it every time I stepped inside. The supernatural manifestations had grown more aggressive. It wasn't just the flickering lights anymore or the whispers. Now it was things moving on their own, objects shifting when I wasn't looking, doors slamming shut for no reason. One morning, I came downstairs to find my daughter's doll in the living room, its eyes wide open. The doll had been in her room untouched, but now it was on the floor, positioned perfectly in the center of the room. Its mouth was slightly open, as though it had been trying to say something. I froze in place, staring at it. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't understand it. But that wasn't the worst part. When I reached down to pick it up, I noticed something else. Something that made my stomach drop. The doll's dress was torn as though it had been violently ripped. The fabric was stained, and I could swear I saw dark smudges on it, like dried blood. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just a prank. This wasn't just the house settling. There was something evil here. Something that had been here long before we ever arrived. I ran upstairs to check on my daughter, Lila. She was still asleep, her tiny body curled up in bed. I stood there watching her for a moment, just to make sure she was all right. But the feeling didn't go away. That oppressive weight, the constant sense of being watched. It was there, lingering. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to talk to Clara. I needed her to understand. When she came home later that night, I showed her the doll. She wasn't fazed. She barely even looked at it. "This is just a doll, Caden," she said, her voice flat, dismissive. "It's old. It's been through a lot. Maybe the kids played with it and it got messed up." But I couldn't also let it go. "Clara, this is real. There's something wrong with this house. Something's happening, and I don't know how to stop it." She didn't listen. She never listened. Instead, Clara pushed harder, determined to make the haunted house attraction a success. "We come this far, Caden," she said, her eyes burning with that familiar ambition. "We can set back out now. We need to finish what we started. We make money, and then will be free." Free. That word used to mean something to me. But now it felt like a trap. I wasn't just trapped in the house. I was trapped in my own mind, my own doubts, my own fears. The more Clara ignored what was happening, the more I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. And the house. It was making sure I did. The supernatural occurrences became more intense as the days went on. The temperature dropped. Even in the middle of summer, I could see my breath in the air, even as I stood near the kitchen trying to calm myself down. Shadows flickered in the corners of my eyes, darting in and out of sight. The whispers grew louder, more persistent, until they were all I could hear. Then one night it happened again. I was in the basement trying to find a way to fix the wiring for the lights when I felt it, a cold hand on my shoulder. I spun around, my heart in my throat. But there was nothing there, just the cold, empty basement. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, to get out, to never look back. But I couldn't. I had to stay. I had to fight. I had no choice. And that sits when I saw it. The walls of the basement were covered in strange symbols I hadn't noticed before. But now they were impossible to ignore. The symbols were drawn in a dark reddish substance that looked disturbingly like blood. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. What was happening here? What had my ancestors done? I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind me. I couldn't escape. I couldn't get out. The air thickened, becoming suffocating. I felt my chest tighten, the pressure building around me. The whispers came again, louder now, almost deafening. "Kaiden, Kaiden." I felt like I was losing my mind. My thoughts spiraled out of control. The house, no, the curse was consuming me. I could feel it pulling me down, drowning me in its darkness. That's when I saw the reflection in the old mirror hanging on the wall. It wasn't my face. It was something else. A figure, pale and twisted, staring back at me. It was my great-grandfather, his hollow eyes burning with malice. His mouth moved, but no words came out. I staggered back, horrified, and turned to run, but the shadows in the room seemed to move, shifting and stretching to block my way. The mirror cracked, the glass splintering like 1,000 voices screaming in agony. I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the cacophony of whispers. And then I felt it, a cold hand, wrapping around my wrist, pulling me into the darkness. I fought, struggling to break free, but the hand tightened, dragging me deeper into the abyss. And in that moment I understood. The house wasn't just haunted. It wasn't just cursed. It was alive, and it had been waiting for me, for my bloodline, for my family's sins to catch up with us. I wasn't just trapped by the house. I was trapped by my own choices, by my past, by the darkness that had always been inside me, waiting to take hold. I had to face it. I had to face myself. I had reached the point of no return. The house, the curse, the whispers, it was all consuming me. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Was I losing my mind, or was this all happening for real? The house had a grip on me now, tighter than ever, and I could feel it tightening with each passing day. The more I resisted, the stronger it became. And Clara, she was still fixated on the money, on the haunted house scam, as though everything was just a game. She didn't see what was happening. She didn't understand. But I could feel it. I could feel the curse pulling us deeper into its web. The house wasn't just a building, it was a trap, and I was caught in it. The decision came to me slowly, like a weight pressing down on my chest. I had to choose, either sacrifice my family to break the curse, or sacrifice myself. There was no other option. The curse was too strong, and there was only one way to break it, but at what cost? I sat in the living room late one night, my mind racing. The air in the house was thick with tension, and I could hear the faintest whispers, like a soft murmur at the back of my mind. It was as though the house itself was alive, speaking to me, urging me to make the choice. I didn't know how long I had been sitting there, but when I finally looked up, I saw Clara standing in the doorway, her face shadowed in the dim light. She was silent for a moment, just watching me. And then she spoke. "Caden, we have to go. We have to finish this. We can turn back now." Her words were like a slap in the face. She didn't get it. She didn't understand what I was going through. She didn't see the danger, the darkness that had taken hold of this house. "You don't understand," I said, my voice hoarse. "We just are in over our heads. The house isn't just haunted, Clara. It just cursed. My great-grandfather, my father, they both got sucked into it. And now it's just trying to take us." Clara shook her head. "You just scared, Kaiden. You letting this house get to you. We can let it win. We have a chance to make something of ourselves. Don't you want that?" Her words were hollow now. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't scared. She wasn't even really listening. All she cared about was the money. She didn't understand what was at stake. I stood up, feeling the weight of my decision pressing down on me. The whispers were louder now, like voices in the room, clawing at my mind. I could feel the curse tightening around my throat, suffocating me. I had to do something. But what? I turned to face her. "Clara, this isn't about the money anymore. This is about survival. And if we don't stop, if we don't break this curse, we're going to lose everything. You don't understand what's happening. This house, it's part of our family's legacy. It's been passed down through generations, and it's feeding off us, off our fears, our mistakes." She looked at me, her face pale, eyes wide. "What are you saying, Caden? Are you saying we should just leave? Run?" I shook my head. "We can run. This house, it sits a part of us now, but there sits a way to break it, a way to end it all." I pulled out the journal from my great-grandfather, the one I had been reading over and over, trying to make sense of it. There sits a ritual, a way to end the curse. But it's not simple. It demands a sacrifice. Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling now. "What do you mean, Kaiden? What kind of sacrifice?" I hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to make the choice, but I had no other option. "The ritual demands blood, either the blood of my family or mine." Her face went white. She took a step back, looking like she was going to faint. No, Kaiden. No, you stir not asking me to sacrifice our family? Not Lila, not me. I could hear the desperation in her voice, the fear creeping in, but I couldn't back down now. The house wasn't going to stop. It was going to take us all piece by piece, until there was nothing left. I closed my eyes, trying to gather the strength to make the decision. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss. I didn't want to sacrifice anyone, but if it was the only way to save us, I can let this destroy us, Clara, I said, my voice breaking. If I have to die to break this curse, I will. But if I have to choose between you, Lila, and me, then it sets me. I won't let you and our daughter be dragged into this hell. Clara Sip's expression twisted with shock, then anger. You can Sips do this, Kaiden. Don Sips, you see? We can get out. We can fix this. You don't have to do anything so drastic. But the house was already pulling us in. I could feel it. The weight of the curse had grown too strong to ignore. It had already taken its toll on me, on my sanity, on my soul. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the family deed, the one that had been passed down through generations, the one that bound me to the house, to the curse. The house won't stop until one of us is gone. It's always been this way. Clara's eyes flickered with realization. She understood now, but it was too late. I'll do it, I whispered. I'll be the sacrifice. Before she could say anything else, the ground beneath us trembled, the house groaning like a beast waking from a long slumber. The walls seemed to close in, the whispers growing louder, almost deafening. I knew what I had to do. The decision had already been made for me. I was the one who had to break the curse. And if that meant sacrificing myself, then so be it. But before I could make the final move, Clara did something that stopped me cold. She stepped forward, her eyes full of terror and understanding. No, Kaiden, I will do it. The house's power shifted then. The weight that had pressed down on me seemed to ease as Clara took her place in front of me, ready to make her own choice. And this when the house made its final demand. The air in the house had grown thick, suffocating. The whispers were no longer just in the walls. They were in my head, swirling, pulling at my thoughts, my emotions. The house was alive, more than it had ever been before, and it was making its final move. Clara had made her decision. She was the one who would sacrifice herself to break the curse, to end this nightmare. I could see it in her eyes. Fear, resignation, but also something else, something that told me she was no longer the woman who had pushed me into this scam. She had become something different, something that understood the gravity of the situation. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. The house seemed to press in on us, as if it was holding its breath, waiting. But the ritual had to be done. The curse had to be broken, and it was clear now one of us had to die. The room around us flickered, shadows stretching and twisting like they were alive, like they were trying to pull us into the darkness. The air was colder than it had ever been, and the house groaned as if it were waking up, preparing for something terrible. Clara reached for my hand, her grip trembling. "This is the only way, Kaiden," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the chaos of the house. "I've made my peace with this. You have to live, for Lila, for us." I wanted to stop her. I wanted to pull her away from the center of the room, away from the ritual that had already started. But I knew she was right. There was no other choice. The house had already chosen its victim, and it wasn't going to let us leave until one of us paid the price. I looked around, desperately searching for a way out, for something that would let us escape this nightmare. But there was nothing. The symbols on the walls had come to life, glowing faintly, their power pulsing like a heartbeat. The very foundation of the house seemed to be vibrating, shaking as if it were trying to tear itself apart. Clara stood in the middle of the room, her back straight, eyes closed. She had prepared herself for this. I could see it in the way she held herself, like she was already gone. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to lose her. "Clara, please," I said, my voice cracking, desperation lacing my words. "We can figure this out. There's got to be another way." She shook her head, her face softening. There isn't set Kaiden. This is the only way to end this. The house, this curse. Its sets has been part of our family for so long. We can set outrun it. You can set outrun it. Tears filled my eyes as I realized what she was willing to give up. She was doing this for me, for Lila, for us. But I couldn't let her. Before I could say anything else, the ground beneath us rumbled, and a deafening noise filled the air, a sound like 1,000 voices screaming in unison. The house shook violently, its walls cracking, the ceiling threatening to collapse. The power of the curse surged, and I could feel it, a cold, suffocating force wrapping around us. Clara stepped forward, her voice steady. "I love you, Kaiden, always." And then, with a final, desperate scream, she began to chant. The words she spoke weren't in any language I recognized, but I could feel their power, their weight. The air grew even colder, the room spinning as the curse's energy swirled around us. I could hear the house screaming, fighting back, as though it were alive. It was refusing to let go. But Clara's voice never wavered. She kept chanting, pushing through the suffocating darkness, and I could feel the curse beginning to loosen its grip on us. The shadows in the room swirled around her, closing in. The house was fighting, clawing at us, desperate to hold on. I reached out to her, but it was too late. Clara's body began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter, brighter, until I could barely see her face. The light from her body consumed everything. The walls, the floor, the shadows, everything. She was the sacrifice, the key to breaking the curse, and she was giving herself to it. I watched in horror and awe as Clara's form began to disintegrate, the energy of the curse pulling her in. She was breaking apart, her body glowing like a dying star. And then, just as I thought I couldn't bear to watch any longer, she turned to me, her eyes locking with mine one last time. "Tell Lila I love her," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the screams of the house. "Tell her I sips am sorry." And then, with a final burst of light, she was gone. The room fell silent. The house stopped shaking. The walls, which had been trembling with energy, were still. The air cleared, and I could breathe again. But it was over. Clara was gone. The curse had taken her, just as it had taken so many before her. I fell to my knees, my heart breaking. She had given everything for us, for me, but I couldn't even bring myself to feel relief. The curse had been broken, yes, but at what cost? The house groaned, its final breath echoing through the walls, and then nothing. Silence. For a long time I just sat there. Numb. Clara's sacrifice had saved us, but it hadn't saved me. Before I could process what had happened, I heard the faint sound of footsteps behind me. I turned slowly, half expecting to see Clara standing there, as if she had never left. But it wasn't said Clara. It was Lila. "Daddy?" she asked, her voice small and trembling. She stepped into the room, her wide eyes searching for me. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The tears welled up in my eyes, and I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly. I didn't want to let go. I couldn't lose anyone else. Layla clung to me, unaware of the tragedy that had just unfolded, unaware of the sacrifice that had been made to save her. We were free, but I would never be the same. The house was silent now. The oppressive weight of its malevolent presence had lifted, but it didn't feel like relief. It felt like an emptiness, a hollow space where the chaos used to be. Clara's absence was a void I couldn't fill. No matter how hard I tried, I had lost her. She was gone, and I could never bring her back. But Lila was still here, and that was all that mattered now. I held her close, my arms wrapped around her small body as if I could protect her from the pain, from the loss, from everything that had just happened. She was the reason I was still standing, the reason I hadn't completely fallen apart. She was the one good thing that had come out of all this madness. But even with Lila in my arms, the house still felt wrong. It felt like something had been torn out of it. A life force, a pulse. And yet it wasn't just the house that felt empty, it was me. Clara's death had shattered something inside of me, and I didn't know if I could ever fix it. The house had taken so much from us, but in the end it had given me a chance to be something more, something better for Leela. I had to find a way to keep going, for her. We spent the next few days in a daze. I tried to focus on what I had left, Lila, my shop. The simple things that had once brought me comfort. But the silence in the house was deafening. There was no joy in it anymore, no laughter, no warmth, just an endless echo of loss. I couldn't bring myself to leave the house. Part of me wanted to burn it to the ground, to rid myself of the last shred of the past that still lingered in its walls. But I knew I couldn't. The curse had been broken. Clara had sacrificed herself to give us freedom. I had to honor that. I had to live the life she'd wanted for us. I walked through the house, each room now a hollow shell of what it had been. The shadows that once seemed so menacing now felt like memories, ghosts of a life that had been stolen. The furniture, the decorations, everything felt out of place. This wasn't the home I had known. It wasn't the place I had hoped to raise my family in. And then, in the corner of the living room, I saw it. A picture frame. It was one of the few things that had survived the chaos. One of the few things that hadn't been destroyed in the ritual. It was a picture of Clara. Of me. Of Lila. A family, happy and whole. I stared at the photo for a long time. The faces in it were strangers now. They were memories that didn't belong to me anymore. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Clara had been right. She had been the one who wanted to make something of this life, of this family. She had fought for us for a future. And I had to carry that with me. I had to carry her memory, her sacrifice. I turned to Lila, who was standing in the doorway, watching me. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. She didn't understand what had happened. Not fully. She didn't know what we had lost. But she knew enough to see the sadness in my eyes. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice small. I kneeled down, bringing her into my arms again. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said, my voice cracking. "Everything's going to be okay. I promise." But it wasn't. It wasn't okay. I didn't know how to make it okay. I had failed her. I had failed Clara. I sat with her for hours, just holding her, trying to block out the pain, trying to forget the loss. But I knew I couldn't. I couldn't forget what had happened, what I had done. The guilt gnawed at me. Clara had given everything for us. She had died to break the curse, to set us free, and I couldn't bring her back. There was no redemption for me. Not for the things I had done, the choices I had made. Clara's death had been my fault. I had allowed her to sacrifice herself for us, and now I had to live with that. But Lila was still here, and she needed me. I stood up, looking around the house one last time. The walls, the rooms, the memories, they were nothing but ghosts now. The house was empty. The curse had been broken. The spirits were gone, and we were free. But the price had been too high. I walked out the front door, Leela in tow, and didn't look back. There was nothing left for us here. The house had taken everything, but it hadn't taken her. It hadn't taken us. And that at least was something I could hold on to. We walked down the driveway, the sun beginning to set behind us. The air felt different now. Lighter somehow. The weight of the house of the curse had been lifted, but the emptiness was still there. The silence. It was too quiet now. We didn't have a destination. I didn't know where we were going, but for the first time in a long time, I felt something stir inside me, a flicker of hope. It was the smallest thing, a whisper of something that could have been, but it was enough. It was the first step toward something new, toward healing. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I could ever move on from Clara's death, from the curse that had consumed us. But I knew one thing: I had to keep going. For Lila, for Clara, for me. I never thought I'd be the one left to carry on the family name. The Hawthorne legacy was one of lies, betrayal, and broken promises. Now it was mine. It wasn't the life I had chosen, but it was the life I was left with. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be trapped by the past. The curse hadn't just been broken, it had been passed down through generations, infecting everything it touched. And even though the house was gone, the shadow of my ancestors lingered over me. The truth was, I couldn't escape them. I couldn't escape the legacy they had left behind. Leela and I spent the next few months trying to rebuild. I knew it wouldn't be easy. There were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable. I had lost Clara. I had lost everything, but I still had Leela. She was the one thing that kept me grounded. And yet, even with her by my side, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I had to confront the truth about my family's past. The curse wasn't just some twisted coincidence. It was a part of who we were, a part of who I was. I had to understand it, even if it meant reopening old wounds. So, I began to research my family's history. I scoured old newspapers, archives, and public records, hoping to find something that would explain the curse. And what I found, I wasn't prepared for. The first real clue came in the form of a letter, dated back to the early 1900s. It was from my great-great-grandfather, the patriarch of the family, written to his brother. The letter spoke of a debt owed to someone, or something that they had tried to repay with a ritual. The debt wasn't financial, it was spiritual. My great-great-grandfather had made a deal with an entity, one that promised wealth and power in exchange for loyalty. The ritual had been performed in the very house we had lived in, and when the deal went wrong, the curse was born. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I read the letter. My hands trembled. The curse had been real all along. It had been passed down from generation to generation, feeding off greed, fear, and betrayal, and now it had come for me. I had been the one to set it in motion again. I sat back in the chair, trying to process what I had just read. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to turn away, to ignore the truth. But another part of me knew that I had to face it. The curse wasn't just something that happened to us. It was something we had earned, something we had brought upon ourselves. I needed to find a way to break the cycle. But how? The letter mentioned a ritual, a way to undo the curse, to sever the ties to the past. It wasn't something that could be done easily, but it was possible. The price, though, was steep, and that was the part I hadn't set wanted to face. The ritual would require more than just the sacrifice of one life. It would require a choice that would determine whether the curse continued or ended forever. It wasn't just about blood anymore. It was about the choices we made, the paths we walked, and I had to decide if I was willing to make that choice. Leela came into the room as I was reading through the letter, her small voice cutting through the silence. "Daddy, what's wrong?" I looked up at her, my heart breaking. She had no idea what I was going through. She didn't understand the weight of the legacy we carried, the curse that had already cost us so much. But she was all I had left. She was the reason I had to keep going. I'm just thinking, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just thinking about what comes next for us." She nodded, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. She didn't understand, and I wasn't sure I did either. But one thing was clear: I had to break free from this family legacy. I had to protect her. I had to keep her safe. The next few weeks were a blur. I spent every waking moment trying to figure out how to break the curse, how to undo the mistakes of the past. I went to the local library, searching for anything that could help. I found more references to my family's dealings with the occult, more mentions of the rituals and the bloodline that had been cursed. But nothing offered an easy solution. The more I searched, the more I realized that the curse had a grip on me that couldn't easily be loosened. I couldn't outrun it. I couldn't escape it. But I could break it. I had to. I found the final piece of the puzzle in a book of old folklore. It spoke of a ritual that would sever the ties to the past, a ritual that required both acceptance and sacrifice. It wasn't a physical sacrifice this time. It was a sacrifice of the heart. I had to accept the past, acknowledge the mistakes that had been made, and let go of the guilt that had haunted me for so long. I realized then that the hardest part wasn't the ritual, it was facing my own choices. I had lived in denial for so long, blaming others for the mistakes that had led us to this point. But I couldn't do that anymore. The curse wasn't just something my ancestors had done, it was something I had participated in. I had to let go of that guilt. I had to accept that I couldn't change the past, but I could shape the future, and that was the only way I could protect Lila. The only way I could protect myself. The next day, I gathered everything I needed. I went to the place where it had all started. The house. the place where the curse had been born. It was a quiet morning, the sun still low in the sky. The house stood before me, silent and still, as if waiting for me to come. I walked through the front door one last time. Lila didn't know what was happening. She didn't understand the weight of the choice I had made, but I knew she would understand someday. I knew she would see why I had done it. I lit the candles and arranged the objects in the circle just as the book had instructed. The air was thick with anticipation. The whispers of the house, the echoes of the past, seemed to grow louder as I spoke the words of the ritual. I closed my eyes and let the words flow. As I spoke, I felt the weight of my ancestors' mistakes, their guilt, their fears melting away. The curse, the legacy, everything that had been passed down through the generations began to fade. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. The ritual had worked. The weight of the house, the oppressive, suffocating feeling that had lingered for so long, had lifted. The curse had been broken, or so I thought. But I should have known better. There's no such thing as a clean break when it comes to a legacy like mine. The days that followed were quieter, almost too quiet. Lydia seemed to sense the shift. She was more relaxed, her laughter returning in small bursts, her innocence bringing warmth back into my life. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The house was calm, but it felt incomplete. I had broken the curse, but a lingering doubt gnawed at me. I couldn't just walk away from the past. No matter how hard I tried, the shadow of it still haunted me, hanging over every moment of peace we tried to find. A few weeks after the ritual, I received a letter. The envelope was old, yellowed with age. I recognized the handwriting, my great-grandfather's. My blood ran cold as I stared at it, the words seeming to burn through the paper. I opened it slowly, carefully, my hands trembling as I read the message. The curse is never truly broken. It only sleeps, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The Hawthorne bloodline is bound to the house, and the house is bound to us. You may have severed its hold for now, but know this, it will return stronger than before. And when it does, it will claim what is rightfully its own. My heart stopped. I had done everything I could. I had made the sacrifice. I had faced the curse head-on and done what was necessary to protect Leela. But this letter, it told me something I had refused to accept. The curse wasn't just tied to the house, it was tied to my bloodline. It couldn't be outrun, it couldn't be escaped. I had been foolish to think I could break it for good. I sat there staring at the letter, the weight of my family's history pressing down on me harder than it ever had before. The curse wasn't something you could just defeat. It wasn't something that could be erased, no matter how hard you tried. It would always be there, lingering in the shadows, waiting for its chance to return. And it was clear now there was no escaping it. It wasn't just about the house anymore. The curse had become a part of me. It had always been a part of us. The bloodline that had inherited the house had also inherited its darkness. I didn't know what to do. I thought I had won. I thought I had broken free. But now it felt like the curse had only been dormant. It had merely been waiting for the right time to rise again. I couldn't let this consume me. I couldn't let it take Lila. But how could I protect her from something that was in our very blood? How could I stop something that had been passed down through generations? I thought back to Clara's sacrifice, her willingness to give everything for us. She had known the risks. She had made her peace with it. I hadn't been ready to accept the truth. I had wanted to escape, to sever the ties and leave it all behind. But I couldn't. I needed to make things right. I had to find a way to end this, to truly break the curse once and for all. But I knew that would come with a cost. It always did, and the question now was what price was I willing to pay? I began to research again, this time looking for something I had missed. Some way to ensure that the curse would stay buried for good. I went back to the journals, the books, the family records. Every old document I could find, but everything I uncovered only reinforced what I already knew. The curse was a part of us, a part of me. The house had taken so much. Clara's life, our future, our peace. And now it seemed to want more. It was never truly gone. It had only been waiting, watching, feeding off the fear and guilt that had been passed down through the years. I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't live with this curse looming over me, over Leela. I had to find a way to end it, but how? The answer came in the form of a ritual I found deep in the family's archives. It was ancient, a dark ritual tied to the deepest parts of our bloodline. It spoke of a final confrontation with the curse, one that would either sever the bloodline's connection to the house or bind it to the house forever. The price was steep. The ritual required one final sacrifice, one last choice. I didn't have to think about it. I knew what I had to do. I had to make the ultimate sacrifice. I had to sever the bloodline completely, ensuring that the curse would die with me. The house would be free. Lila would be free. But I would have to pay with my life. I went to the place where it all began, the house. It stood there just as it had before. The shadows were gone, the oppressive feeling lifting, but I could still sense the remnants of its darkness. Leila was staying with a friend for the day, unaware of what I was about to do. She didn't need to know, not yet. Not until I could make sure she was safe. I stood in the center of the house, my heart pounding, my mind racing. I knew this was the only way. The curse had taken enough from us. It had to end. I began the ritual, reciting the words that had been passed down through the generations. I felt the house groan around me, as though it were waking up, sensing what was happening. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows gathering in the corners. The whispers began again, louder this time, more insistent. But this time I wasn't set afraid. I finished the ritual. And then, in one final act of defiance, I sealed the house's fate, sealing my own in the process. The house groaned one last time, the curse lifting. And then silence. I collapsed to the ground, exhausted, my heart heavy. The curse was broken, for good. But I had given everything. The silence was suffocating. It had been hours since the ritual. The house had fallen eerily still, as if it were holding its breath. And so was I. I stood alone in the center of the living room, staring at the spot where the curse had once consumed everything. Now it was quiet, but the quiet felt wrong, empty. I had sacrificed myself to break the curse, to end the Hawthorne bloodline's grip on the house. But even now I could feel it. The remnants of the curse, the weight of the past. I could feel the presence of my ancestors, lingering in the corners, whispering their silent judgment. It wasn't over. It couldn't be. I had done what I thought was necessary. I had ended the cycle, but the house, it seemed, had other plans. It had always been about the family, about the bloodline, and now, with the ritual completed, with my sacrifice made, it seemed the house was claiming its final prize. I didn't realize how long I'd been standing there, lost in thought, when I heard a sound, soft, muffled. It came from upstairs, from the room where the rituals had begun. I had left it untouched since that night, not daring to step foot in there again. But now, something was drawing me in. Something was pulling me back to face what I had tried so desperately to outrun. The whispers began again. This time they were not in the walls, they were in my head. Kaiden, Kaiden. It was a voice I knew. It was my father's, and it was more real now than ever before. I walked toward the stairs, my body heavy with the knowledge of what I was about to face. Every step felt like a final one, like the house was closing in around me, preparing for the final act in its twisted play. I reached the top of the stairs, the door to the room in front of me, slightly ajar, just enough to let the faintest light seep through. I pushed it open, and there, in the center of the room, stood my father. But it wasn't him. Not really. His figure was blurry, flickering like a shadow caught in the wind. His face, twisted and pale, was nothing like I remembered. It was a face I had seen in my nightmares, the face of someone who had never truly been there for me, the face of a man whose absence had shaped everything about me, everything I had become. "Father," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. He smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It was the smile of someone who had long given up on any notion of redemption. "You did what you had to do, Caden," he said, his voice cold, lifeless. "But you can escape this. You never could. The bloodline is bound to the house. It always has been, and you will carry it with you, whether you like it or not." I stepped back, shaking my head. "No, it steps over. The curse is broken. I did what had to be done. His eyes narrowed. Did you think it would be that simple? Did you think you could just end it all with a ritual? You can set break a legacy like ours, Caden. You can set outrun the sins of your ancestors. The room began to darken, the shadows growing longer. The walls closed in around me, the air heavy with the weight of every word he spoke. The house wasn't just a place. It was a living entity, feeding off the anger, the guilt, the despair of every generation that had lived in it. I am the legacy, I said, my voice steady despite the fear that gripped me, and I set paid for it. I set broken the cycle. You think you've paid for it? His laugh was hollow, echoing through the room. The curse was never about paying, Caden. It was about keeping you in line, keeping you tied to this house. And no matter how much you want to escape it, no matter how much you sacrifice, it's still inside you. It's always been inside you. I looked around the room, desperate for some way out. The ritual had broken the curse on the house. The spirits of the past had been sent to rest. But here was my father, still haunting me, still pushing me to carry on the legacy. And it wasn't just him, it was the house. It was my bloodline. The air thickened. The temperature dropped. The walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, like the house was alive, alive with all the sins, all the guilt, all the unfinished business. And I realized something. The house wasn't just a curse. It was a mirror, a reflection of everything I had been trying to escape. Let it go, Caden, my father's voice said again, but this time it wasn't just his voice. It was every voice from my family's past, the voices of my ancestors, the voices of the curse itself, pulling at me, calling me to remain part of it. But I couldn't est. I wouldn't sent. I took a deep breath, stepping forward, my fists clenched. I the sub not you, I said, my voice growing louder with each word. I the sub not my father. I the sub not my ancestors. Is as made my own choices. And I the sub broken this curse. I the sub done. This ends with me. And with that, I turned my back on him. On the house, on everything it represented. The shadows in the room reached for me, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I walked out of that room, out of that house, and didn't turn around. I could still hear the whispers, still feel the weight of the legacy pressing on me, but I refused to let it define me. I had broken the curse, yes, but more than that, I had broken free. And as I stepped out into the light, into the world beyond the house, I finally felt something I hadn't in years: hope. It's hard to describe what it feels like to walk away from everything you've ever known, to leave behind a house, a family, and a legacy that had haunted you for as long as you could remember. But that's exactly what I did. When I left that house, I didn't just leave behind the walls and the rooms. I left behind a lifetime of guilt, of mistakes, and of curses that had weighed me down. It wasn't an easy choice. Nothing about this was easy, but it was the only choice I had left. Lila and I settled into a small town, far away from the Hawthorne legacy. The house, the curse, it felt like another life now, like something that happened to someone else. But there were nights when the silence would creep in, when I would find myself staring at the shadows, waiting for them to move. I would hear her voice, Clara's voice, whispering in my ear. It wasn't real, I knew that, but sometimes it felt like she was still here with me, still watching over us. I tried to keep busy. I worked on the cars, started fresh, and tried to rebuild what had been broken. But it wasn't the same. I wasn't the same. The house had changed me, twisted me, and no amount of work could undo that. I couldn't escape the past. No matter how far I ran, it would always be with me, a shadow that I could never quite outrun. But for Lila, I had to keep going. She deserved better than what I had given her. She deserved a life without the weight of the curse, without the darkness of our family's past. We found a small house in the countryside, a place where the air felt clean and the past seemed miles away. It was nothing fancy, just a simple home with a yard for Leela to run in, a place where we could make new memories. But even there, the ghosts of the past were never truly gone. It wasn't until one late evening, a few months after we moved, that I fully understood the price of breaking the curse. I was in the yard, working on the garden, when I saw it. A flicker in the corner of my eye. I turned, expecting to see Lila, but there was nothing there. Then a voice. Kaiden. It was Clara's voice, soft like a whisper in the wind. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as I looked around. The yard was empty. The house was still. There was no one there. But I knew. I knew it wasn't just the wind. I knew what it was. The curse was over. The house was gone. Clara was gone. But something about the past was still tethered to me. The truth I had learned, the choices I had made, they would stay with me, just as Clara's sacrifice had. I walked into the house, my feet heavy, my mind clouded with thoughts I had pushed away for so long. I found Lila in her room, sitting on the floor, her drawing book open in front of her. She looked up at me and smiled, her innocence shining through like a beacon. "Daddy, will you come read to me?" she asked, her voice filled with that same untainted joy I had tried so hard to protect. I nodded, a tear slipping down my cheek, but I didn't let her see it. I walked over to her, my heart swelling with love, with regret, with everything I had tried to bury. As I sat beside her, opening the book, I realized something. The curse had never been about the house or the bloodline or the sacrifices. It had been about me, the fear, the guilt, the mistakes I had made. It had all been mine to carry. And while I couldn't change the past, I could change what came next. I would protect Lila. I would protect her from the ghosts of our past, from the curse that had nearly destroyed us. I would give her the future Clara had dreamed of. We didn't need to run anymore. We didn't need to hide. We had broken the curse, and while it had taken everything from us, it hadn't taken Lila, and that was enough. I kissed her forehead, tucking her in, and whispered softly, "Good night, sweetheart." And as I closed the door behind me, I finally felt the weight of the past lift. It wasn't gone, not entirely, but it no longer had a hold on me. It no longer had a hold on us. The curse was over, and with it so was the legacy.